Courageous Confidence Summit. I have an amazing person with me today. She's an incredible woman named Susan Gilbert. I mean, I just met her, but I'm already like, we have to keep talking. She's one of the top 100 marketing influencers, along with Seth Godin and Gary Vee. Oh, yes. Okay. And she's also been named the one of the top 2017 women in digital marketing. She's the author of the book, The Land of I Can. And Susan's new direction is of particular fascination to me. We're going to talk to her about it through this conversation. Her new direction is under the brand Destined for More, and that goes for all of us. So, Susan, woohoo!
Hey, oh, Laurie, thank you so much for finding me. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Oh my God, I really want to just yield the floor for a minute and ask you to tell us your story in relation to courage and what that has been for you.
Yeah, well, it's something that I learned very early in life, and it's one of those things that you don't ask to have happen. It's not something that you pray for or ask for, and yet as you'll hear as I continue down this storyline, that it was a problem that on the other side yielded a bigger life and greater opportunities. When I was only 25 and had been married just a few years to a man who returned safely, thank goodness, from the Vietnam War. And my mother at the time was 51. So he was 28, she was 51, both very young. My husband was the son that my parents never had, and they absolutely adored him. And we were kind of living the life, you know. He was in college. Our joint goal together was after he graduated from college, it would be my turn. I wanted to be a music teacher. I thought it would be great. I'd have summers off with the kids, the family that we had planned. I mean, we had a plan. Then in the winter, when a lot of people have colds and flus and even pneumonia, my husband had that ongoing cough, fever, illness that just wasn't going away. And we finally got him to go to the doctor, who did some blood work and sent us home to wait for the results. And I got that phone call that said, take Dave to West Penn Hospital immediately. The hematologist will be waiting for him. He was diagnosed with acute myelogenous leukemia, a prognosis of 6 weeks to live without treatment. And of course, he began treatment. I won't go into the story of how many times the treatment had to be stopped because of reactions. My mother was so distraught over this situation that she was having stomach and digestive issues. She finally went to the doctor, and we found out that she had cancer of the colon that had spread to her liver. So now she's on the 9th floor of West Penn Hospital, and my husband is on the 3rd floor of West Penn Hospital. And my life for the next 6+ months was going back and forth, up and down the elevator between the 2 floors.
Oh boy.
He passed away first. And then several months later, my mother passed away. And that whole odyssey took place in less than the span of 1 year. My husband was 3 credits away from graduating from college. So again, you know, life as I knew it was gone. I was 25, and I was a mature 25-year-old. But you're not up for that kind of life disorientation and disaster, for lack of a better term, at 25. My father was not supportive. He was so distraught over both of them that he was leaning on me, and I had a younger sister who was leaning on me. Then people who I would meet, whether it was relatives or friends, who would, you know, greet me on the street and say, "Oh, how are you? I'm so sorry." And they were well-meaning. They were well-meaning, And God loved them for sharing their grief on the situation with me, but that's not what I needed. I needed to be uplifted. And rather than feel like a victim, which is how I was beginning to feel,
Yeah.
I had already done a lot of self-introspection study. I was studying Edgar Cayce and Carl Jung, and that was already a part of my life. And so I went inward. And what I heard, Laurie, was a voice that says, there's more. There's more to life than this. So when my husband had first finished his tour of duty, we had, for a very short, the very first months of our life, we had lived in Southern California as he was stationed at El Toro, which is outside Santa Ana. And then when he finished, we went back to Pennsylvania, which is our hometown area. I remembered that first voice that says there's more, because I wanted to go to college, but I couldn't afford it in the state of Pennsylvania. So the first essence of believing that there was something more that I could do allowed the opening for me to explore other opportunities. And it's kind of like that reticular activating system that we hear so much about, that when we set our sights to buy a particular car, all of a sudden we see them everywhere.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Once
Absolutely.
we set our mindset of focus, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as our time together continues, because that's what I believe so much in, is where we focus. But I didn't know that. It was an inner wisdom that was speaking to me, because I didn't have the knowledge for it at that age. And so I began to realize and remember that in the state of California, if you establish residency after 6 months, you can go to a state college.
Oh, wow.
And, I'd already lost everything.
Yeah.
And while a lot of people later would say, where did you have the courage? Where did you have the courage to make that move? Part of it was, I've already lost everything. But the other part of it was that inner wisdom that we all have. And I think there's so few of us that tap into it. I did it naturally. I can't take any credit. I think I have really good guardian angels that have looked down on me and swooped in on me and lifted me up when there weren't humans around to do that for me. But that's what I feel my purpose in life now is, to help other people get their inner courage. They're meant for more. They're destined for more, because I feel like so many of the things, and I could keep you on here for hours telling you stories, and I won't, but on that, every time there's been a problem in my life, if I looked beyond the problem and asked the question, where's my focus? Where's more? Where am I destined to be? Things would start to open up for me that I would not otherwise have seen. And I'll give you another quick example. When I did move to Southern California, didn't know anybody, got a minimum wage kind of job just to bide time until I could get my residency and figure out what my college curriculum would look like, and then I would find work that would fit around the curriculum. Mm-hmm. I went to a weekend seminar held at National University, which is a university that caters to people who are in the workforce and going to school evenings and weekends, which is what I figured would probably be the path that I would take. And after several days of just like aptitude tests and interaction within the classroom, it came up that the two career paths that I could look at was an attorney, because I had good communication skills, right, and architect, because I had good 3D spatial understanding. Mm-hmm. And which is so crazy. Here I am, I'm in my late 20s now, and I'm thinking, I can't do, I mean, it's going to be hard enough for me to get 4 years of college. I can't do 6 or 7 or 8 years more for advanced degrees. And so I was feeling very depressed and dejected leaving.
Yeah.
And as I'm walking to my car, a woman who had been in the weekend seminar, and there hadn't been one-on-one conversation between she and I, but she walked up to me and she said, "Hey, have you ever thought of sales?" And I thought, what did I ever say that somebody would recommend sales? I was thinking sleazy car salesmen and polyester suits and Fuller Brushman, and like,
I know.
no, it was just a terrible feeling. And then she continued on to say that her husband had opened up a store selling computers, and she thought I would be perfect.
Oh my
And it was another like,
God.
computers. I don't even know what a computer looks like, let alone operate. And you want me to sell a computer? And I was just mind boggled, Laurie. She handed me.
We didn't have like laptops and personal computers.
No,
then.
not yet. Not yet. This was the predecessor.
Yeah.
So I took her card and I got in my car and closed the door and dropped the business card in the side pocket of my car and thought, oh my gosh, these people in California, this is really crazy. But I drove around with that card in my car and I would look at it and you know, I was like, what was this about? And finally I called. His name was Jake Satin Jacobs. And when I got past the secretary or the person receptionist and immediately got through, he answered the phone saying, "Susan, I'm so glad you called. Patty told me all about you."
You're like, what does she know about
What
me?
does she know about me? Well, Jake and I had this wonderful conversation. I thought, I'm going to go in and meet this man. And you want to know what the computer store was?
What?
It was a Radio Shack store where they sold the TRS-80 computers, which was the predecessor to the IBM PC.
Oh my God. You were put on a path.
Put on a path. He sat me down in front of these huge computers
Oh yeah.
and showed me how I could insert and delete instead of working on a typewriter with whiteout and
Yes.
just little sheets you put in there with the white stuff on them. He showed me how to sort in a database by different criteria. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would have had to do that by hand, you know, showed me how to use a spreadsheet to do what if statements. And I was sold. I did not know how that computer worked. I barely knew how to turn it on, but I knew how to use it.
Yes.
And with that, I started going out. He set me up. He hired me. I started. He set me up on a vertical market to go out and meet with attorneys who were using Wang word processors, talk about ancient history,
Yes.
to replace that with a computer that could do the word processing, but could do the database, could do other functions, could do accounting.
Right.
And I would go out on sales calls and they would ask me questions that I didn't know the answers to. And I would run back to the team and I'd say, okay, you know, they want to do this and can they do that? And how do we do that? Then I would go back to the client with the answer and they would buy and they would buy and they would buy. Little did I know that it was because I didn't have computer science background, because I wasn't a programmer. I wasn't talking bits and bytes and processing speed. I was talking about solutions.
Oh my God.
And I was
very Aaron Brockovich of you, you know.
Well, thank you, but it was a solution based on I cared about them.
Right.
I wanted to hear what their problems were. And then I wanted to see, was there a solution that I could provide to them? Well, when the IBM PC came out, I was well known in the community. I had to jump ship. I had to leave Jake because he couldn't sell the IBM PC. When they first came out, IBM sold at Sears, Computerland, and the IBM Salesforce. but we had 6 Computerland stores in San Diego County where I lived, all owned by the same partnership. And it took a while, but as a woman, I got that courage up and said, I'm going to meet with these people. And even though one of the partners greeted me at his store and stood behind the cash register, ringing up sales intermittently while he spoke to me. I mean, he did not give me a lot of time.
Okay.
And then when they came back to me, they said, that was a good idea, but we used to work at NCR and we've got a lot of NCR buddies. We'll get one of them to head this up and then you can work for him. And I don't know where I got it, Laurie, but I said, thanks, but no thanks. If you want me, you're going to bring me in and let me head up this division.
Nice.
And they said yes. They called the division PC Sales, and they said, as long as you make a profit, you have a job.
Well, I want to ask you about that moment of courage, because I've had that too, where like a stronger voice has come out of me than I thought I currently possessed. And for me, it has felt, I don't know, like somebody divine took over my being and said, blah, but I don't think it comes completely out of the blue. I think that, in thinking about it and saying, I'm tired of being less than I want to be, it sort of primes the pump, maybe. I don't really know. What do you think?
Well, again, we were talking a little bit before the official interview that I have really strong spiritual beliefs. I was raised Lutheran. My family here, now Gilbert is my maiden name. One of the things that I did was when I took that big move from Pennsylvania over to California, I went back to my maiden name, and it was a way for me to kind of recapture who I was before the marriage and only tell my story when I wanted to tell it, not as part of who I was. And my married name was very, very long. It was Grotenthaler.
You spelled it a lot.
Yes. So, yeah, absolutely. And so, for both of those reasons, I went back to Gilbert. But the Gilbert Lutheran heritage can be tracked back to Europe and like multiple centuries back in the Bibles and the Lutheran Church. And so it was part of my heritage, not just the religion that we attended. And as such, it was part of my family upbringing. It wasn't just go to church on Sunday. It was who we were. We were hardworking, hardworking Germans coming from, get the job done. But it's also where children are seen but not heard. And there's a lot of things from both that lineage as well as for women and their place and their role that takes place. And if we have time, I'll tell you a little story around that. But to go back to, but I really believe that I was beautifully, and again, only from a gift of God, I was beautifully instilled with a sense of personal confidence.
Okay.
And yet the confidence as a woman out into the world really took flight when I made the choice to move from Pennsylvania to, it was like there was something was ignited in me. And once I was willing to take that first step, because I believe in taking one step, the Land of I Can talks about taking one step, that one step leads to another. And every time we stretch outside our comfort zone and we do something that our mind tells us, I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can do that. And then you do it and go, oh, I did that. Wasn't that hard? Thinking about it, worrying about it was harder than just doing it. I think you're building a muscle, like a courage muscle. Yes. So I had already been living in Southern California. It took a courage muscle to call Jake. It took a courage muscle to go out and do a sales call to an attorney's office when I'd never done anything like that before. I had no sales training. Just Jake was like, I believe in you. You can do this. Go go out. So each time you do something like that, you are stretching and you're exercising. The same way when we're going to exercise, we don't go to the gym and lift, 200 pounds the first time. You start a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. You get stronger, you get stronger. And I think at the point that Dave, I won't say his last name, but Dave called me and said, we've got these ex-NCR guys.
Yeah.
I was like, no. And it came, as you said, it wasn't, I didn't think about it. I didn't think, okay, how am I going to respond to him? What am I going to do? It was just no.
Boom.
Boom.
Yeah.
And I didn't say it in a mean-spirited way or, difficult way. It was just, no. If you want me, I need the person to do it. And the craziest thing is immediately he goes, okay.
When you stand in your truth, when we stand in our truth with a capital T, not truth like I believe this today and I might think that tomorrow, but when we stand in our truths, it's really powerful. And I'm very interested in you talking about the fact that you work with, actually you work with men more than you work with women. So that's a
Well, it's been an evolution. When I first launched The Land If I Can, and it's just a gift book. I have it right here because I actually had read something to someone earlier, but
cool.
here's a passage. And what I had read to someone earlier, I kept this bookmarked, is it says, and this is around the land of fear, is do you feel frozen, unable to move? Fear is holding you, stopping you from realizing your dreams. Breathe. Good. Now exhale. Life doesn't exist without fear. To be fearless is to have less fear and to move. So this little book I wrote because I thought women would buy it for other women and then buy it for themselves. And that was true, but it started going out into business situations, school situation. It's now used for character development in the San Diego Unified School District. So from that, I had people coming to me, men and women, saying, I have a book. Can you help me market it? I have a book. You have a wonderful website you're selling your book from. Could you do a website for me? Yeah. I was doing that work when social media came on. So I was perfectly positioned to use social media. And I remember going to Book Expo in New York in about 2007, 2008, and talking to publishers about doing Twitter tours. And they're like, Twitter? What's Twitter? Because it wasn't mainstream yet.
Right.
So I was working with both men and women. Then as publishing and self-publishing became far more common, everybody and their brother who had ever published a book was saying, I'm the publishing guru, I can help you, I can make you #1 on Amazon, which is true. It's not that hard to do it for one day. It's a lot harder to do it for a week or a month or ongoing. And I'm all about business building. So I began to see the difference between those who were building businesses and those who were writing fiction or memoir or stories, poems, things because it was just their passion. And while I certainly support all creative endeavors, my wheelhouse is business. Mm-hmm. And so that started to make the funnel get a little bit smaller.
Right.
To the point that because I'm so entrepreneurial, and I did do a short stint with AT&T because they hired me. I was known as the PC person, personal computer person in San Diego. And when they hired me, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because I'm like, woohoo, I have arrived. I'm an executive and I have a staff. I have salespeople beneath me. Wow. And then I realized they hired me for my entrepreneurial spirit and then nipped me off at my knees because I couldn't do anything that I had been able to do. So needless to say, I left and then I created a brick and mortar business called Little Miss Muffins. Whole another story again. But because I'm entrepreneurial as well as business oriented, what I found were the people who have that same spirit and they have a message that they want to get out into the world. One of the websites that I have is called Messengers on a Mission.
Okay.
So I love working with people who have that inner calling. Not everybody has it. Not everybody has to have it. But
Right.
if you do, if you have that calling inside that says there's more, I'm supposed to do more, which is where the destined for more has come from. Those are the people that I can really get behind and I can really help. And it just tends to be in ratio 2/3 men, 1/3 women. The
Well,
other thing, go ahead.
wanting more is a passion. It is a feeling, a knowing, a drive. And if you don't have it, that's fine. Like
Exactly.
if you don't want it, that's fine. If you hear this and you think, I wish I had that, guess what? It's latent. It's coming.
Yeah, it's like the goal of our lives is to have a deep satisfaction with
Right.
our lives and to live in peace and harmony with the life that we're living. And if someone who is listening to this is a mother and a grandmother and has grandchildren that bring them joy and a garden that they love to work in and they feel fulfilled, they've done their job on this planet. But the people that come to me are the people that say, I have this message and I don't know how to get it out. I have a book and I don't know how to get it out. Or I want to write a book, I want to go out and speak. I have a lot of people come to me and I want to go out and speak. And I'll say, well, that's great, but all speakers should be authors and all authors should be speakers. So let's look at what your core message is, which is where the branding comes in. Let's look at what your core message is and then build your platform from that. So it isn't that I work exclusively with men, but what I think is interesting about my work with men is that we as women come together and support each other. We'll talk about our heart and our feelings for the most part. Not every woman, no generality is good, but just as a sex, the women will tend to share more and show more emotion. And I think about my dad, who worked in the steel mills for 25 years and was in the Army Reserves for 25 years. And he couldn't have talked to the men at the mill about what his troubles or his concerns were. No. He couldn't talk about the men that he led in the Army. And quite frankly, coming from the generation that he came from, he probably wouldn't talk to my mom about it because that wasn't his role. His role wasn't to emote feelings and to share concerns. It was to make money, support the family, do his job. So many of the men that I'm working with who have already achieved a certain level of success and found that success didn't answer that more, like I got the more money, I got the better car, I got the bigger house, but still not feeling like that's what I'm supposed to be doing. They don't have anyone to talk to. And they also, I think, if they have had that certain level of success, they're not going to talk to their guy friends, and they probably aren't going to talk to their wife about it, is that they have more risk, in all honesty, because that risk of failure to do this new endeavor when they've already been seen as successful, and they could have egg on their face, so to speak, from their peers. So for me to be able to work with them is maybe it's, helping the men in my life. I can't help my husband, can't help my dad, but I certainly have compassion for their role on the planet.
Well, I do have a question for you, and I wouldn't sort of pop it on you customarily. It's just that the times we're living in demand that I ask you this. And I had an interview yesterday with 2 African-American women. The first one I spoke to, both were upset. And the first one said to me, I asked her how she was doing with all of the riots going on and all of the the ongoing deaths, murders and things like that. And she said, oh, I'm just taking one day at a time and doing what I can. She said, and I appreciate you asking, but she said, I would rather you ask your white guests. And I said, oh, that is rather provocative and needed. So my question for you is, you and I we know what it's like to be women in a man's world, although you've told me previously that it actually took you some time because of your inherent self-confidence
Yes.
to understand why a woman wouldn't have self-confidence, but let's leave that lay where it was.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, what would you say about all that's going on, the need to, you and I both love peace, but there are revolutions. There are things that bring about great change and that we can't do it any other way, or at least we haven't sometimes. So what would you say?
Thank you for asking, first of all. Thank you. I thought about that when we're doing interviews around courage, but I wasn't sure you wanted to go there. So thank you for asking. I've been sitting with it over the weekend. I finally did a Facebook post on my personal, not my business, on my personal profile yesterday.
Yeah.
That basically said, there are no words, I have no words, but I'm listening and I'm here. And I think that those of us I'm a privileged woman. I work on the land of the property that I own. What you see in the background, this is my office in the upstairs of a barn on my property. How could I possibly think that I know how someone who was born of a different skin color feels? Can't do it. But I can have empathy, and I can be there, and I can be aware of my role in whatever I say, whatever I do, to know that we all have different human experiences. I wrote to a friend in South Africa who is Caucasian. He's from the US, but he lives all with mostly Africans, not African Americans. And I saw him when I was in Africa in January, and he was talking about, and I noticed that he's in Nairobi, Kenya. There's no racial tensions in Kenya. And he had gone to lunch with men of both black and white skin. And he said, I dropped the bomb on the table. And he said, and I asked them, and we talked about it. He said, there you are in the US, which we think is the Holy Grail, and we don't understand what's happening.
We don't either.
Yeah, and the only thing that I could think about, and I'll give you a little personal story around it, is that just like the differences between men and women, this isn't something that's just happened a generation before us or 2 generations before us. The differences between men and women's roles in the world goes back to the beginning of time. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of years old.
Yeah.
And when we look at the history here in the US, we've never cleared up what took place back in the early evolution of our country. It's never been cleared up. No. And even though certain things get put in place in terms of hiring a minority, whether that's black or yellow or red or whatever that might be, that doesn't hit the core level problem that it's not equal. I was also writing in the same email that growing up, my mother was from the South. Okay. And my dad would take his vacation time. Now, when I think that he never had a vacation the whole time I was growing up, it just boggles my mind. But he drove us to North Carolina every summer. And then his vacation was spent doing repairs for my grandmother on her little house in the cabin. And then driving the family back again. And as a kid, I loved it because we would do all kinds of fun things like go to Gettysburg and drive down through the Smoky Mountains and come up to Washington, D.C. and visit, the Smithsonian. We did those things as part of that journey, but I'm sure that wasn't very fun for my dad. And yet, coming from the north, Pennsylvania being in the north, I would go down to the south, and I would see at the gas stations or the restaurants where there'd be the separate door for coloreds, or
Yeah.
the sign that says no coloreds allowed. And I
Mm.
didn't understand that because we didn't have very many children of color in my school, but we had a couple.
Mm-hmm.
To me, they were the same as me, and I didn't understand that that wasn't true overall. And my mother would talk with my younger sister and I about the situation, and then she took us to the Baptist church of her upbringing, which is now 99% Black.
Mm-hmm.
And they're shouting. The Lutheran church is very quiet, and
Yes, it is.
you join in when everybody else sings, but you don't shout out. You're quiet.
Oh, man.
Not quiet in the Baptist church.
No.
And they were joyful, and they're singing, and my eyes probably were as big as saucers that, oh my gosh, there's a different way of being in church. Now, I bring that up only because all of these are differences. It's differences in the way that we have a belief, a religion, and how we practice that.
Right.
It's differences between different parts of the country and how things get played out.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, in the South, they don't have those signs anymore, I don't think. I hope not.
I haven't seen any.
But those issues still are there.
Yes.
Those
Not
belief
just in the
systems.
South.
No, exactly. But I mean, just using those examples. When I
Mhm.
made the post that I mentioned to you that was on my Facebook profile, the first person who responded is one of my Facebook friends. I don't know her in person, but she's a woman who is Black.
Yeah.
And she put in a couple comments that just broke my heart about her son. And that her son wasn't doing anything wrong, but he just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time during these protests.
Oh no.
And she said, I won't post his picture here because he's had more to deal with. But I got the picture of what took place.
Is he still with us?
He's still with us, but I have a suspicion he's burned or beat up or both.
I just don't get it.
That's it. I mean, we don't.
Violence as an answer, even though I get that we can be hijacked and emotionally, but no, stop.
Yes. Well, even, we could, there are many, many people of color. There's a wonderful plea to the city of Atlanta that is available on by a rapper to say, we're angry, but violence doesn't solve the problem. But it's just, people become violent, and I'm not condoning it, but when they think there's just like nobody's listening, which is why, there's the whole I am listening that is happening. I think we just have to listen and give a place for people to say, I'm angry and it's okay.
And I think that to bring it back to include the topic we're talking about, that it takes a great deal of courage to listen, to whether that's listening to other people who you may be afraid to hear what they have to say, or listening to yourself when you might not have listened to yourself very well before. There's a lot of things I've been exposed to over the years that have to do with I'm listening in terms of health. Can you sit at the bedside of somebody in a hospital who is in tremendous pain and make room in your heart for that person to be in pain and to be with them, be resonating with them with love instead of with fear?
That's very interesting. I'm seeing I have almost like a halo. I've got a light here. Let's see if that makes a difference. Do you? Yeah, is that better?
Maybe you're an angel.
Oh, no. Anyway, thank you for bringing that up, because just as I was mentioning earlier that we have opportunities where we get to exercise courage. We have opportunities where we, little by little, and that muscle gets stronger and stronger. I didn't realize it, Laurie, but I was exercising that when I sat at the bed with my husband, when I sat at the bed with my mother. I didn't realize it, but yes, it does take courage. And there were many of my mother's friends who, because her illness and cancer was much more debilitating physically than it was to my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And she had so many friends who would call her on the phone, but they say, we can't come see your mom because it's just so upsetting. And I was like, you can't come see her? Well, who are you putting first here? My mom needs to see you. But they couldn't come.
I understand. Yeah, I've seen it happen. And I've actually been on the other side of that one with a friend of mine who passed away last year. And we weren't exceedingly close for a long time, but at one point we were, and we did keep in touch. And I said to her, I will be there if you want me there. But she never said that she wanted me there. And I felt guilty for a while about it. I should be able to sit there, but I just, whatever. I think it's a really complex thing, and I could talk to you about that for hours, because I don't really want somebody sitting there with me who feels miserable. I don't need more of that either.
No.
So
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
funny sort of talk. But listen, we're running out of time, sadly. I can talk to you for hours. And I wonder I want you to talk about what you have as a gift for us. And I also want to ask if we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Yes and yes. Yes and yes. So 3 points I'd like for people to garner from what we've been discussing.
Thank you.
And it'll fit with the gift that I have, is that when we get focused, tip number 1, and when we live in that focus with a wholeheartedness, with feeling, positive emotion, with joy, and we take one step. If we can do those 3 things, we can live a much more courageous life. And so my gift is how to focus on truly what matters. I'm looking over here at my screen that I've got, that you'll have as the download. It includes the ebook, the handbook, I Can handbook, I Can checklist, I Can worksheet. And so it gives the framework of some of the things that we've been talking about, and where my belief is, it's a personal thing of believing. And I'm not talking about wishy-washy, like, oh, I can do this, and I'm going to go get in a car and I've never driven before, and I'm going to get on the freeway. I'm not talking about foolishness. I'm talking about that courage within to instill and learn to grow the belief that we can do so much more than our brain will sometimes limit us in thinking.
Oh my God, I am so happy you're on the planet.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for doing all of the interviews and putting this all together so that women and people and men, everybody, can live more courageous lives.
Yeah, we have to now, and doing it with the guidance that you're giving us, which is like, it's like handholds. It's wonderful. Thank you. That was like a light bulb going off for me. That was cool.
Thank you, Laurie. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. We'll do this again. Thanks, sweetheart.
Bye-bye.
Bye.